There are 10 ways that God's people can bend time. Today, I'll show you 7 or 8 of them. This isn't about time management, it's about time redemption. It's not just about clocks and calendars, it's a spiritual reality that's been reshaping my own story. Your singleness is not punishment. The years are not wasted. When I read this book, also, it wasn't just time bending, it was mind bending and deeply ministered to me smack dab in the middle of my long singleness. Joel 2:25 says in multiple translations, He will restore to you the years, the NKJV. He'll make up for them, the Passion Translation, and give you back what you lost, the New Living Translation. That means the years aren't wasted, they're invested. What if the years you're resenting are the exact years you'll be thankful for in your marriage? This book asks and answers, how could time be a cruel master if what God created was good? What if time was not created to rule man, but to serve man? What if we thought of time as a good friend and servant rather than our master? Through the cross, time was restored to its original role as servant, not a tyrant. That means your years of singleness aren't ruling over you. They're serving God's purposes in you. The lie about time. Psalm 31 verse 15 says, My times are in your hand. One of my newest favorite books is written by Dan McCollam. It's called Bending Time, Accessing Heavenly Realities for Abundant Living. There are 10 chapters that detail 10 time benders. I'll unfold 7 or 8 of them in the following segments. Time is not happening to you, it's happening for you. Delay is not denial. Delay isn't God ghosting you. Delay is God investing in you. The enemy says you're behind, but God says you're right on schedule. Now, if you're stuck in the drive-thru too long, it's usually because they're making something fresh, not because you've been forgotten. Longevity does not equal failure. Just because you've been single longer than you've planned to doesn't mean that you've failed. Longevity is not disqualification. It's often evidence of deeper preparation, revelation, and transformation. Think about Moses, 40 years hidden before leading Israel. Longevity was his training ground, not his failure report. Delay doesn't mean denial. God's not yet is not God's no. Abraham and Sarah waited decades. If God could still bring Isaac out of a barren womb at 90, he can bring covenant love out of your waiting season. The delay magnified his glory when the promise finally arrived. The world uses clocks. God uses seasons. Culture says, marry by 30 or you're behind. God says, bear fruit in season. Farmers don't freak out if spring looks empty. They know harvest is coming. Singleness isn't your expiry date. It's your planting season. For over a decade, I had a sense that 2022 was going to be significant. I had a long anticipation for it over the years. When times were challenging, I'd often encourage myself knowing that 2022 is not too far away and there was something good to look forward to. When times were good, I thought about 2022. And when times were the worst of the worst, after much travail, I would be encouraged to keep hoping, keep believing, and keep being obedient. Without divulging too many gory details, 2022 unfolded with such skyrocketed excitement. And then 5 months in, plummeted to the depths of soul anguish and the darkest night of the soul that I'd ever lived through. Decades of longing and anticipation evaporated just like that. And it was a spiral that I didn't quickly recover from. What do you do when you waited, hoped, and eagerly anticipated for decades, only to be met with grave disappointment? What I learned is that free will trumps prophetic will, but that's a message for another episode. Time didn't betray me. Free will revealed me. Free will wrote the detour. And that's why I can say with full conviction today that time is not happening to me, it's happening for me. Isaiah 60, verse 22 says, when the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. What if you've been looking at the wrong clock this whole time? You've been watching your age like a countdown clock instead of your purpose like a stopwatch. That's why the wait feels cruel instead of strategic. If you only measure life by birthdays, every candle feels like a loss. But if you measure by fruit, every year becomes a harvest. We aren't commanded to manage time, but to redeem time. Dan McCollam writes, I'm the perfect age for everything God has for me right now. You're not too young, too old, or too late. You are the perfect age. Time is your good friend, not your mortal enemy. Time is your helpful servant, not your cruel master. If to when. Language is powerful. And after enough years of waiting, your language starts to betray your heart. That's why one of the greatest shifts you'll ever make in long singleness is this: moving from the word if to the word when. Years of waiting can change your vocabulary for the worse. After enough birthdays, awkward family reunions, and hearing still single from Aunt Margaret, it's easy to slip into resignation. You start saying, if I ever marry, instead of when I marry. That single word shift is a confession of doubt, and it subtly rewrites your faith story. If language signals doubt, when language signals faith. If is survival language. It means you're bracing for disappointment. When is covenant language. It means you're preparing for fulfillment. It's the difference between dreaming of travel and actually packing a suitcase. Nobody paints a nursery for a baby they don't believe is coming. Faith prepares, doubt procrastinates. Zachariah and Elizabeth were well past their expected timeline, yet still received the very thing they prayed for. Their faith had grown weary, but God's timing hadn't failed. Hebrews 11, verse 11 says, by faith, even Sarah herself received power to conceive. There's power when you believe, power to receive, and power to conceive. In short, your problem is the long wait triggers silent resignation. The agitation's been holidays, birthdays, and weddings, the same ache year after year. The solution: change your language. When fuels your preparation, if fuels your passivity. From if to when. This isn't just wordplay, it's faith training. Shifting from if to when changes how you pray, how you plan, and how you prepare. Nobody builds a wedding playlist for a marriage they don't believe is coming. But when faith says when, you've already booked the DJ. It's the lie that's been keeping you stuck in singleness, because that lie lives in one tiny word: if. What if faith sounded different coming out of your mouth starting today? Let's rephrase that. This is when faith sounds different coming out of your mouth starting today, because the soundtrack of your life will always set the stage for your future. If you keep rehearsing defeat, you'll live defeated. If you start rehearsing faith, you'll live ready. And readiness creates the man your wife can actually follow into covenant. Joy is a time bender. McCollam says that joy alters your perception of time's duration. Joy doesn't shorten the years, but it changes how you feel. Joy bends the weight of time so you can endure the long wait without collapsing under it. Prayer is a time bender. McCollam says that prayer positions the heart and multiplies time. Prayer is what takes if and turns it into when. Every time you pray, you multiply the fruit of your waiting. Stewarding the long season. Here's the truth. Waiting doesn't mean wasting. Long seasons can either leave you bitter or they can make you better. Stewardship is how you turn your long singleness from punishment into preparation and positioning. Just ask yourself, how many marriages do you know that began with one or both spouses ill prepared to be married to one another? Can you picture them? Yeah, that's not your story. You were the most prepared, worked on yourself, refined by fire, eligible specimen of a man that you know. Faith and action equals your readiness. Faith without works is dead. Preparation is the works. When you hit the gym, balance your budget, grow your emotional health, that's not busy work. That's prophecy and action. It's saying to God, I'm ready for the weight of the blessing I'm praying for. Long seasons are prime time to master health, leadership, and relational skill. Most people waste their waiting season scrolling, numbing, or comparing, but the long season gives you a training camp. You could build stamina, communication skills, humility, and boundaries, the very muscles you'll need in marriage. If you steward them, your season multiplies value instead of multiplying frustration. Our KSB member married in his late 40s with a maturity level that only decades of singleness could have forged. He laughed, telling us that if I had married at 28, I'd have been a nightmare. My pride would have crushed her. My immaturity would have sabotaged us. Thank God that I had those extra 20 years to become the man that became her husband. Preparation equals partnership. Preparation is how you tell God, I'm serious. It's the human side of covenant. Nobody buys a tuxedo or practices a wedding just for fun. They do it because they believe the day is coming. The years of waiting don't mean you're behind. It means you've been handed the tools to win, and you'll be more prepared than anyone you know for the very thing that you've long been obedient for. Galatians 6, verse 9 says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. What if the length of your wait is proportionate to the size of your alignment? Let me rephrase that. The length of your wait is proportionate to the size of your alignment. Because alignment is everything. You can want marriage, but unless your heart, your habits, and your holiness are lined up with God, the wait will stretch longer. And here's the mystery. How could you possibly recognize the woman God has in store for you unless you're first aligned with Him? The closer that you are to His voice, the clearer you'll hear hers. Alignment with God always leads to alignment with her. And the bigger the covenant He's aligning, the longer the preparation feels. But once it's locked in, the timing accelerates. Dan McCollam calls this abiding is a time bender. When you abide in God's presence, time bends. What once felt delayed suddenly accelerates. Long years start to collapse into the right moment because when alignment locks in, doors open faster than you ever imagined. We aren't commanded to manage time, but to redeem time, rewriting the narrative. Every long singleness story has two narrators. One is the enemy whispering shame, lateness, and punishment. The other is God whispering preparation, precision, and purpose. Rewriting the narrative means silencing the wrong voice and choosing the right one. You're not late. You're not overlooked. The wedding invitations you haven't sent yet aren't proof that God's forgotten you. They're proof He's still editing your chapter with precision. Think about Joseph. Looked forgotten in prison, but God was aligning him for Pharaoh's palace in the exact right time. You're not forgotten. You're positioned. Your story's timing is intentional. Every delay has detail. If God orchestrated Elizabeth to conceive John the Baptist at the exact moment to prepare the way for Christ, he can sync your marriage with your destiny. God is never careless with timing. What looks like delay is actually choreography. Your story is not over. Don't put a period where God only put a comma. He's not done. Netflix can pause your show and pick it up later without losing the plot. Surely the author of time can hit pause on your season and still resume the story at just the right chapter. You don't cancel your Netflix subscription just because your show's on pause. Why would you cancel hope just because your story feels delayed? The world's been whispering the wrong story in your ear for too long. Romans 8, verse 28 says, "And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him." Dan McCollam says, abiding is a time bender. Abiding in God's presence pulls heaven into your timeline. What once felt like delay suddenly accelerates. Alignment with him collapses wasted years into appointed moments. That's how you can say, my story isn't late, it's aligned. Let's use the past framework. Problem, agitation, solution. Your problem? You've been single so long, it feels like punishment. You measure yourself by years and milestones instead of fruit and faith, and those years have quietly become a cruel yardstick of your worth. The longer the yardstick, the smaller you feel. Your agitation? Birthdays don't feel like celebrations anymore. They feel like reminders. Another Christmas dinner with an empty chair. Another wedding invitation you RSVP alone. And the questions? When are you getting married? Have you found anyone? Or the dagger one, you know you can't wait forever. They don't hear it, but every time you do, it chips away at hope. Your solution? The only way forward is to destroy the lie. Replace if with when. Steward the season like it's training camp, not punishment. Because one day the door will open and you want to walk through ready, not resentful. That's when the years that felt wasted suddenly make sense. What's the story that you are co-authoring with Jesus? Don't live by default. Live by design. When is your moment of enough? When have you decided to stop treating the wait like a punishment and start preparing for it to end? Call someone today and share the story of when you hit that breaking point and the day that you decided to stop treating singleness like punishment and start preparing for it to end. Maybe it was after a crushing disappointment, just like me in 2022, or one too many "you're not getting younger" comments. Let the vulnerability breathe. What shifted in you, and how did that shift reframe the entire season? Long singleness is not God's punishment, it's God's positioning. Every year you've lived has been shaping you for something far above and beyond the timeline that you thought you needed. The question is, will you use these years or resent them? Because alignment with God today is what makes you ready for covenant tomorrow. Dan McCollam calls it finishing is a time bender. Finishing strong reframes the wait as fruitful anticipation instead of failure. Your single season isn't wasted because it's unfinished. It's still being written. Don't quit before your breakthrough chapter. Share this with a friend who's endured trials and tribulations and still believes in marriage and multiplication. Watch this video next. She Wants You're Ugly: Why Women Are Drawn to Imperfect Men. Here's why a little ugly might be the most attractive thing about you, and how to stop disqualifying yourself based on lies you've rehearsed for years. You don't need a filter. You need to hear this. Now, remember, you're not single by accident. Your singleness is not happening to you. It's happening for you.